Hello, welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why, and how of newspaper reading. Today, we are going to discuss important news appearing in New Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 26th March 2019. The news to be discussed has been presented on the screen, and timestamping for the same has been provided in the description box below. Let's start our today's discussion. Now, the first news appears on page number 1 and also appears as a continuation on page number 10. It says, "Why not increase the VVPAT count?" asked the Honorable Supreme Court of India. So, in an ongoing case in the Supreme Court of India with respect to cross-verification of VVPAT, the Supreme Court has observed that it is in favor of increasing random physical verification of VVPAT paper slips. However, the idea of increasing random physical verification of VVPAT paper slips have been opposed by the Election Commission of India. In response to the observations made by the Supreme Court of India, the Election Commission said that VVPATs are working fine and every step taken by the Election Commission is based on expert statistical data. Further, the Election Commission also submitted that it has taken various steps over the period of years to improve the electoral process with respect to transparency and purity in the conduct of Lok Sabha and Assembly elections. Further, the Election Commission also mentioned that the Election Commission on its own have bettered its parameters with respect to conduct of elections. However, the Supreme Court of India was not very much satisfied with the submission of the Election Commission, and it only asked the Election Commission to take steps to improve the purity as well as satisfaction with respect to conduct of elections. And on this, the Honorable Chief Justice of India said that no institution, however high, including the judiciary, should insulate itself from improvements. He further said that we are only asking the Election Commission to do a little more for the sake of purity of the elections. Further, he said that we would like you to increase the physical counting of these VVPAT paper slips. Further, the Chief Justice of India said that his view was not with respect to casting any aspersion on the working of Election Commission, but he was only asking to take certain steps with respect to physical verification of VVPAT paper slips in each assembly constituency as well as assembly segment for the upcoming state legislative assembly and Lok Sabha election, as it was a question of satisfaction. So this is what the Honorable Supreme Court said with respect to submission of the Election Commission of India. So after these arguments, the Supreme Court has asked the Election Commission to submit its reply by Thursday, that is 28th March 2019. So let's wait and watch what the Supreme Court has to say on Thursday with respect to physical verification of VVPAT paper slips. Now, the arguments presented in the ongoing case was filed by 21 opposition parties through a petition where they demanded random verification of at least 50% of EVMs and VVPATs in every assembly segment and constituency. So it is in the backdrop of this particular case that the Honorable Supreme Court of India has asked the Election Commission to submit its view with respect to physical verification of VVPAT paper slips. Further, the petition filed by the opposition parties have also sought to quash Election Commission guidelines with respect to physical counting, as it says that physical counting of VVPAT paper slips shall be conducted only for one randomly selected polling station. So this they have asked to increase to at least 50%. Since the matter is sub judice, so let's wait for the final order of the Supreme Court of India. Now this topic with respect to cross-verification of VVPAT as well as physical verification of VVPAT paper slips becomes extremely important with respect to your upcoming prelims as well as mains examination. Now in your prelims, this topic forms a part of Polity and Governance, and in your mains, it gets covered under GS paper 2. With this, let's move on to our next news discussion. The next news appears on page number 5. It says PSLV C45 project will mark several firsts for Indian Space Research Organization. Now this topic in your prelims examination becomes a part of general science, and in your mains it gets covered under GS paper 3 under technology. So ISRO's PSLV C45 EMISAT mission is scheduled for launch on 1st April 2019, and this will be ISRO's first attempt to place payloads in 3 different orbits. Now the chief payload EMISAT, which weighs 436 kg, will be injected into the 749 km orbit. Now EMISAT refers to electromagnetic spectrum measurements. So after injecting EMISAT in the 749 km orbit, the space rocket will be maneuvered to the 504 km orbit, where it will release 28 international satellites. After releasing the international satellites, it will then be guided to an orbit of 485 km, where it will serve as an orbital platform to conduct space-based experiments. And these orbital platforms will also have solar panels. So this particular information, which has been taken from ISRO's website, says that the PSLV C-45 EMISAT mission weighs about 436 kg, where EMISAT based on ISRO's Indian Mini Satellite 2 IMS-2 bus platform. The satellite is intended for electromagnetic spectrum measurements. The EMISAT will also serve as India's roving device for detecting and gathering electronic intelligence from enemy radars across the borders, as the EMISAT will circle the globe from pole to pole in roughly 90 minutes. Now these are the three space-based experiments which will be conducted on the orbital platform. The first is Advanced Retarding Potential Analyzer, and this is a project of Indian Institute of Space Science and Technology. The Advanced Retarding Potential Analyzer will study the structure and composition of the ionosphere. The Indian Institute of Space Science and Technology is an autonomous institute under Department of Space of Government of India, and this is situated in Thiruvananthapuram. The Indian Institute of Space Science and Technology is one of the leading scientific organizations engaged in space research and space applications. The second experiment is Automatic Identification System, and this is ISRO's payload for maritime satellite applications. And the third experiment is Automatic Packet Repeating System, that is APRS, which is meant to assist amateur radio operators. And all these three experiments will be conducted in the orbit of 485 kilometers. Now since the EMISAT will conduct research with respect to structure and composition of the ionosphere, so let us understand certain basic facts about ionosphere. It says that the ionosphere is so called because of the presence of large number of ions or charged particles, and this extends from a height of 65 km to about 400 km above the Earth's surface. It further says that ionization occurs due to absorption of the ultraviolet and other high energy radiation which comes from the sun by air molecules. So this fact becomes extremely important from your prelims point of view with respect to ionization. It says that ionization occurs due to the absorption of ultraviolet and other high energy radiation which comes from the sun by air molecules. Now the ionosphere is further subdivided into several layers. As you can see in this picture, that part of stratosphere, mesosphere and even thermosphere forms parts of the ionosphere. Now another important fact mentioned here is that the degree of ionization varies with the height. So the degree of ionization, it depends on the altitude. It mentions that the density of atmosphere decreases with height. So at great heights, the solar radiation is intense, but there are few molecules to be ionized. So at greater heights, because of few molecules to be ionized, there is less ionization. Now for altitude closer to Earth, it mentions that even though the molecular concentration is high, the radiation intensity is very low close to the Earth. And because of this, the ionization closer to Earth is again very low. However, at some intermediate heights, there occurs a peak of ionization density. So the peak of ionization density occurs at some intermediate heights. So this particular information with respect to less ionization both at greater heights and even at lower heights or lower altitudes becomes very important to know from your prelims perspective. So this particular news with respect to PSLV C-45 EMISAT mission becomes very important for your upcoming prelims examination. With this, let's move on to our next news analysis. The next news appears on page number 18 in the in brief section. It says that Chandrayaan-2 will carry NASA's laser instruments. It says that India's lunar mission Chandrayaan-2, which is scheduled to launch next month, will carry NASA's laser instruments, as this will help scientists to make precise measurements of the distance to the moon. So this NASA's laser instrument will help the scientists to make a precise measurement of the distance to moon. It also mentions about Israeli lander Beresheet, which will also carry NASA-owned laser retroreflector arrays. So this information that Chandrayaan-2 will carry NASA's laser instrument to help scientists to make precise measurements of the distance to the moon becomes a part of general science in your prelims examination. So from a prelims point of view, you must remember that Chandrayaan-2 will also carry NASA's laser instruments. And you must also remember about Beresheet, which is an Israeli lander. So on this note, let us learn certain basic facts with respect to Chandrayaan-2 as well as Chandrayaan-1. So it says that Chandrayaan-1 was India's first mission to moon, which launched successfully in October 2008, and this launch took place from Sriharikota. Chandrayaan-1 orbited around the moon at a height of 100 km from the lunar surface for chemical, mineralogical and photogeologic mapping of the moon. So Chandrayaan-1 took close pictures of the moon, including its chemical, mineralogical and photogeologic mapping. It says that Chandrayaan-1 carried 11 scientific instruments built in India, USA, UK, Germany, Sweden and Bulgaria. Now Chandrayaan-2 is an advanced version of the previous Chandrayaan-1 mission. And this Chandrayaan-2 is configured as a two-module system comprising of an orbiter craft module and second a lander craft module. So Chandrayaan-2 mission is configured as a two-module system comprising of an orbiter craft module and a lander craft module, and this also carries a rover developed by Indian Space and Research Organization. Now we have already seen that Chandrayaan-2 will comprise of an orbiter craft module, a lander craft module and also a rover developed by ISRO. So it mentions that Chandrayaan-2, after reaching the 100 km lunar orbit, the lander housing the rover will separate from the orbiter. And after the controlled descent, the lander will soft land on the lunar surface at a specified site and deploy a rover. So Chandrayaan-2 will actually touch the lunar surface. It further says that the mission will carry a 6-wheeled rover which will maneuver around the landing site in semi-autonomous mode, as it will be decided by the ground commands from Earth. The instruments on the rover will observe the lunar surface and also send back data which will be useful for the analysis of the lunar soil. So this mission will also collect lunar soil for analysis. It says that the Chandrayaan-2 will orbit around the moon and perform objectives of remote sensing the moon, whereas the payloads will collect scientific information on lunar topography, mineralogy, elemental abundance, lunar exosphere, as well as signatures of hydroxyl and water ice. That is, the Chandrayaan-2 mission will also try to find traces of water, if any, on lunar surface. So these are some of the important information with respect to Chandrayaan-2 which you must remember from your prelims as well as mains point of view, as questions can be asked in your prelims examination as well as in your mains examination. So in this news we must remember about Chandrayaan-2 as well as the fact that will also carry NASA's laser instruments, and also about Israeli lander Beresheet. With this, let's move on to our next news discussion. The next news appears on page number 5. It says minimum area, maximum plants, man-made forest in Kottayam, home to 4,800 plant varieties, and this enters record books. So this man-made forest has entered the record books for developing maximum number of agriculture as well as horticulture species in minimum area of just 30 acre. And this man-made forest has now been placed in the Universal Records Forum World as well as in the Limca Book of Records. Now as you can see in this picture, this area is surrounded by paddy fields and also cover various activities such as agriculture, animal husbandry as well as dairy farming. Now for your prelims examination, this topic forms a part of current events of national importance as well as environment. Now question in the year 2018 was asked on artificial lake. So on this note, this becomes important to know that a man-made forest at Ayampudi known as Mango Meadows has now been placed in the Universal Records Forum World as well as in the Limca Book of Records. The question asked in the year 2018 was, Which one of the following is an artificial lake? In this, the correct answer was A, that is Kodai Canal in Tamil Nadu. Now, the mango meadows or the man-made forest is a vibrant and self-sustaining ecosystem which lies in the district of Kottayam, and Kottayam is in state of Kerala. It says that the man-made forest is also an agricultural theme park and has diverse agriculture as well as horticulture species, which includes commercial crops like oil seeds as well as stimulants and aromatic medicinal plants. It says that even cardamom is grown, which is generally found at higher altitudes. And as we have already mentioned, that this particular property also covers various activities including agriculture, animal husbandry as well as dairy farming. So in this news, you must remember about this mango meadows, that this man-made forest has entered the record books. With this, let's move on to the next news analysis. The next news appears on page number 13. It says yield curve doesn't signal recession. Now this particular topic is with respect to yield curve. The news says that the yield curve inverted on Friday for the first time since mid 2007, and this is a shift that has in the past signaled risk of recession. So basically an inverted yield curve signals recession. So in this analysis, let us understand this concept of yield curve. Now see, it is written that under normal circumstances, there is proportional relationship between interest rates and maturity period. So maturity period for a bond for short term has low rate of interest, whereas maturity period for a bond for a longer term has high rate of interest. And it is also because of the risk factor involved in the economy. Now let's take an example with respect to India. Now in India, as of now, there is no near-term risk to the Indian economy. However, one cannot be sure about the long-term prospects of the Indian economy. So, considering the fact that there is less risk in the short-term economy, so the rate of interest for bonds in the short term is comparatively less as compared to rate of interest provided for such bonds having higher maturity periods. So we can say that one is not so sure as to what will happen to the Indian economy, say 30 years later. So any investment in the Indian economy for a longer term, say for 30 years, poses a long-term risk. And since for a long-term period, the risk is more, the rate of interest offered to such long-term investment is comparatively more as compared to the rate of interest offered on such bonds having a short-term maturity. Now let's see what has happened in the United States, because of which this particular news has appeared. The 3-month interest rate for treasury bonds in the US is giving a rate of 2.46%, whereas the interest for 10-year period on the same treasury bonds is 2.44%, which is slightly less than a 3-month period. And it is because of this there is an inverted yield curve on the graph, and generally an inverted yield curve signifies slowdown in the economy. So this development in the US bond market has raised concerns that inverted yield curve possibly points to global economic recession in future. So you must understand this concept of inverted yield curve as it signifies global economic recession in future. So on this note, let us also understand what is a yield curve. It says that a yield curve is a graph that depicts yields, that is rate of interest on bonds ranging from short-term debt such as 1 month to longer term debts such as 30 years. Now the yields of the government bonds is taken into consideration usually to track the yield curve as it signals growth or slowdown in an economy. It further says that the yield curve may provide important clues related to present as well as future economic conditions in a country. So you must remember all these aspects with respect to yield curve, as such concept-based questions can be asked in a statement-oriented questions in your prelims examination. Now let us understand this example through a normal yield curve as well as through inverted yield curve. Now we have taken two periods, that is one is for a shorter period of 1 year and another is for a long period of 10 years. And in this graph, term to maturity has been shown on x-axis and yield has been shown on y-axis. As you can see in the normal yield curve, yield or rate of interest for a 1 year period is comparatively low as compared to yield for a 10-year period, whereas this is just the reverse in an inverted yield curve. As you can see, that is the rate of interest on a 1 year period is comparatively higher as compared to the rate of interest offered on a longer period of say 10 years. So in an inverted yield curve, a bond having longer term to maturity say for 10 years offers a lower rate of interest as compared to a bond of having shorter term to maturity, say having a 1 year period, which offers a higher rate of interest. And this is exactly what has happened in the United States of America. And it is because of this that the US bond market has raised concerns that inverted yield curve is possibly pointing towards a global economic recession in the future. So important point to be remembered with respect to inverted yield curve is that it generally signifies a slowdown in the economy. And if there is a case of inverted yield curve, then there is higher rate of interest in the bond market for shorter duration as compared to longer duration. Hence, this concept of yield curve becomes very important with respect to your UPSC examination. Now for your prelims, this topic gets covered under Indian economy, and in your mains, it gets covered under GS paper 3. So after understanding the concept of yield curve, let's move on to the next news analysis. The next news appears page number 13. It says, norms soon for regulatory sandbox for fintech sector. The Niti Aayog had organized the Fintech Conclave in New Delhi on 25th of March 2019. And the objective of this Fintech Conclave was to shape India's continued ascendancy in Fintech. Now, Fintech is a word which is a combination of two words, namely finance and technology. So it mentions that the objective of Fintech Conclave was to shape India's continued ascendancy in Fintech, build the narrative for future strategy and policy efforts, and also to deliberate steps for comprehensive financial inclusion. So these were some of the important aspects with respect to this Fintech Conclave organized by Niti Aayog. So during this Fintech conference organized by Niti Aayog, the RBI governor has stated that RBI will issue norms for introduction of a regulatory sandbox policy in order to promote innovation by fintech companies. Now, RBI's proposal to issue norms on regulatory sandbox policy is based upon the recommendations of a working group on fintech and digital banking appointed by the RBI. So in this news analysis, let us understand about fintech companies, examples of innovative products of the fintech companies, as well as about the sandbox policy. Now this topic in your prelims examination gets covered under Indian economy, and your mains gets covered under GS paper 3. Now about fintech companies, it says that fintech is a combination of the words finance and technology, and it refers to technological startups that are emerging to challenge traditional banking and financial players. And the innovation through fintech covers an array of services such as crowdfunding platforms, mobile payment solutions, online portfolio management, money transfers, etc. It further says that some of the major fintech products and services which are currently used in the markets are peer-to-peer lending platforms, crowdfunding, e-aggregators, blockchain technology, distributed ledgers technology, big data, etc. Now, you must know about these fintech companies and the products and services which they offer, because this particular term, that is fintech, can be asked in your upcoming prelims examination. So on this note, to know about fintech and the products and services which it offers becomes important. Now let's go through some of the examples of these innovative products as well as services provided by these fintech companies. So first of all, it mentions about crowdfunding. It says that crowdfunding is a way of raising debt or equity from multiple investors via an internet-based platform. So basically, crowdfunding is a way to raise debt or equity from multiple investors via an internet-based platform. On this note, the Securities and Exchange Board of India, that is SEBI, has released a paper where it has defined crowdfunding. It mentions that crowdfunding as per SEBI means solicitation of funds, that is small amount, from multiple investors through a web-based platform or social networking site for a specific project, business venture or social cause. So this can be said to be the definition of crowdfunding, as provided by the Securities and Exchange Board of India. Moving further, it talks about peer-to-peer lenders, where it says in peer-to-peer lenders, that is P2P, it connects lenders and borrowers using advanced technologies to speed up loan acceptance. So in a P2P concept, it connects lenders as well as borrowers using advanced technologies to speed up loan acceptance. Now these technologies are designed to increase efficiency and also to reduce the time involved in access to credit. So basically with the help of these technologies, it helps in improving access to credit in a reduced time frame. Further, it mentions about e-aggregators, where it says that e-aggregators provide internet-based venues for retail customers to compare the prices and features of a range of financial or non-financial products such as standardized insurances, mortgages, and even deposit account products. So these can be said to be some of the examples of these innovative products of the fintech companies. Now moving further, let us understand about the Sandbox policy. As the RBI said that it will soon issue norms to introduce regulatory sandbox policy. So generally, sandbox policy refers to experimenting with the product on a limited sample size. So it says that the sandbox policy is designed to encourage innovation by these fintech companies within a well-defined space as well as duration, where regulators would provide the requisite regulatory framework. So it is in this aspect that the RBI wants to issue norms to regulate this sandbox policy. Now, regulation of the sandbox policy would lead to increased efficiency, better management of risk, as well as new products for consumers. It says that a sandbox policy allows companies to test products in a closed environment, that is, within a particular geography or among a set of users before they're allowed to roll out commercially in the market. So under sandbox policy, companies test their products in a limited space and time. It further says that as a part of this policy, the regulators provides appropriate regulatory support by relaxing certain specific legal and regulatory requirements for specified duration. So basically, regulators in a way try to promote this sandbox policy by liberalizing certain legal or regulatory requirements. So we can say that the idea behind sandbox policy is to enable these fintech companies to test their new products without much of regulatory hassles. So it is in this backdrop that the RBI intends to issue norms to introduce regulatory sandbox policy. Now let's see if there are any benefits with respect to this sandbox policy. It says that the users of a sandbox can test their product's viability without the need for a larger and more expensive rollout. So it not only saves expenses but also tells them in a way how to improve their product. So after the experiment, the companies know whether the product have any potential to be successful in the market, and if there are high chances of its being successful in the market, then the product will be authorized and brought in the broader market more quickly. And if there are any concerns with respect to the product during the experiment, then appropriate modification can be made before the product is launched more broadly in the market. So these can be said to be some of the benefits with respect to this sandbox policy. So this news becomes important to know about certain concepts such as sandbox policy and certain innovative products used by these fintech companies. With this, let's move on to our next news analysis. The next article appears on page number 9. It says, balancing work. More women can be a part of workforce only if men share the burden of unpaid care work. Now this article is with respect to International Labour Organization's report on a quantum leap for gender equality for a better future of work for all. It says that the gender inequality is perpetrated due to gender bias in unpaid care work. So this whole article is with respect to this gender bias in unpaid care work. Now in your prelims examination, this topic forms a part of social development, and your mains gets covered under GS paper 2, specifically under social justice. Now let us understand what are the findings of this report. It says that 70% of women were eager to be in paid employment outside their home, but 45% of these women actually have jobs. So there is a gap between the desire to do job and the actual reality of having a job for these women. So this gap highlights the difference between desires and reality of these women. Further, it talks about unpaid care work. It says that unpaid care work poses the biggest impediment to women's employment. It says that almost 21.7% of women of working age are engaged full time in caregiving without any pay, while only 1.5% of men fall in the same category. So again, this report highlights the difference with respect to full-time caregiving without pay for women as well as for men, where it highlights that 21.7% of women of working age are engaged full-time in caregiving without pay, whereas the same percentage for men is a mere 1.5%. So it is on this note that this report highlights the gender inequality between men and women. Now this article also highlights about the impact of unpaid caregiving. And on this note, it has mentioned about three aspects, that is motherhood penalty, parenthood employment gap, as well as leadership penalty. On motherhood penalty, the article highlights that mothers in the workforce experience additional disadvantages as compared to women who are not mothers. Further, this article says that this problem is more acute for such women having children in the age group of 0 to 5 years, as compared to such women having older children. Now, in the parenthood employment gap, it is talking about such parents who have to take a gap or a break in their employment to raise their children. And this parenthood employment gap is more severe for women as compared to men. The article further highlights about leadership penalty, which comes in the form of wage penalty with motherhood, and it highlights in a stark contrast with wage premium for the father with respect to the entire career span, considering both of the mother as well as of the father. Now this leadership penalty can also be associated with the fact that only about 25% of women with young children are said to occupy managerial positions. Now this statistic of 25% with respect to women having managerial positions who have children can be contrasted with 75% of men who have children and can be found in managerial positions. So the article highlights about the impact of unpaid caregiving both for the father as well as for the mother. So after going through the impact of unpaid caregiving, let us analyze the gender bias in unpaid care work. It says that unequal dividends or benefits are acquired from education because of a skewed distribution of unpaid work between male and female. It further says that majority of women drift to unpaid care activities, which is quite evident from the fact that out of the total unemployed youth, 69% of these unemployed youth is women. Further, even when these women are engaged in paid work, it is mostly in the unorganized sector. It further says that among adults having university degree, 41.5% of women are either unemployed or outside the labor force. So again we find a stark contrast between men and women in terms of employment. So we can say that among adults having university degree, there is more unemployment among women. However, there is also certain contrast, as it says that those women who manage to break through these barriers are better qualified than men, and they also rise to the top positions even faster. As across the world we find that over 44% of women managers hold an advanced degree as compared to 38.3% among their male counterparts. So it can be said that there is a need to rehaul the current gender roles in order to expand the arena of paid work for women and also reduce long working hours for men. And in doing so, it will also promote women's participation in the workforce. Now after a discussion, these are your practice questions. What you can do is to take a pause of 5 seconds. First, it says consider the following statements. First, crowdfunding refers to raising debt or equity from multiple investors through an internet-based platform. Yes, this statement is correct. Second, P2P lending platforms, crowdfunding, blockchain technology are examples of fintech products and services. Yes, we have seen this statement is also correct. So in this the question is asking which of the statements given above are incorrect. Since both these statements are correct, hence the correct answer here is D. That is, none of the above statements given above are incorrect. The second practice question says, which of the following statements are correct about inverted yield curve? First, it signals a growing economy. No, an inverted yield curve signals slowdown in the economy. So the statement is incorrect. Second, rate of interest for bonds is high for a short-term period. Yes, the statement is correct as this is the exact case which happened in the United States. So in this, only the second statement is correct. So the question is, select the correct answer using the code given below. So in this, 2 only is the correct answer, that is B. Now these are your practice questions number 3 and practice question number 4. What you can do is to take a pause of 5 seconds. It says, Mango Meadows was recently news as it got registered in record books. Which of the following best describes Mango Meadows? Options are artificial lake, man-made forest, tribe in Australia, and none of the above. In this, the correct answer is B, that is man-made forest. Moving on to question number 4, it says, Chandrayaan 2 will carry which of the following along with it on its lunar mission? Options are rover built by ISRO, lander craft module, orbiter craft module, emisat. In this, the correct options are 1, 2 and 3. So here D becomes a correct answer. With this, we come to an end to discussion of today's newspaper. Now we have been receiving a lot of comments and queries from all our viewers with respect to compilation of DNS themes as well as MCQs for your prelims 2019 and also with respect to subject-wise revision modules. And we do understand the need for having such compilations which are very handy for your preparation. So to assist you in your preparation, we at Rao's IAS Study Circle have compiled these Compass C3 booklets on different subjects, and these Compass C3 booklets are based on core, current and conceptual themes. Further, based on your queries, we have also tried to compile previous practice questions which were discussed in DNS videos from June 2018 till present, that is till March 2019. So based on the previous practice questions from DNS, today we have segregated questions on environment, ecology as well as biodiversity. And this has been provided to you as a PDF link. So what you can do is to download these questions which were practiced in previous DNS videos. Further, these previous practice questions of DNS will be provided to you subject wise on different dates. With this, let's move on to the question for the day.